This tiny chip might be the cause of the next world war. Hard to imagine, right, that such a minuscule device would hold such power. Throughout history, people have been willing to kill and die for resources, and today is no different. While gold and spices used to be the coveted treasures, now it's microchips that are causing concern. But why are these tiny devices so important? It turns out that microchips are the lifeblood of our modern technology. Without them, our devices would be useless. They are the brains of the business, controlling all the wonderful functions that we rely on. And with the global sales of chips adding up to a whopping $555.9 billion in 2021, it's clear that they are big business too. But there's a problem. While the silica used to make microchips is widely available in sand, there's a growing demand for chips that's outstripping the supply. In fact, 1.15 trillion chips were shipped in 2021, and yet the demand still hasn't been fully met. It might seem hard to imagine that something as small as a microchip could spark a war, but conflicts have been fought over resources throughout history. And with the military also reliant on this technology, it's not hard to see how a lack of chips could lead to conflict. Chips are a critical component in many electronic devices, which lead it to being called the digital gold. As the world becomes increasingly reliant on consumer electronics, a new challenge is emerging: the global chip crunch. The United States was once the world's largest manufacturer of chips, but today, around 72% of the world's chips are produced in Asia, with Taiwan, South Korea, China, and Japan leading the way. According to the Washington Post, the U.S. only holds a 13% global market share in terms of production capacity, while the EU and the rest of the world have around 15%. This is a significant shift from the past, where the U.S. was the dominant player in the chip industry. In today's landscape, this critical industry is being dominated by one player, and that's the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company Limited, TSMC. It's capable of producing both simple and high-end chips. Taiwan produces a staggering 65% of the world's semiconductors and over 90% of the highest-end chips. As such, no company is more singularly important to the global economy than TSMC. Countries and companies that cannot avail themselves of TSMC's most advanced semiconductors simply cannot develop certain critical technologies. The company's decisions thus can bear directly on matters of global security. The U.S. know the importance of this industry, so they're now playing catch-up. In 2022, under President Joe Biden, the U.S. passed new legislation allocating $52 billion for microchip production and research. This investment is intended to help the U.S. regain its footing in the chip industry and bolster its national security. To this end, TSMC has also invested $12 billion in building a semiconductor fabrication plant in Arizona, which is set to begin producing chips in 2024. Biden has expressed optimism about the U.S. leading the way in microchip manufacturing, and the investment from TSMC is a positive step in that direction. The chip crunch has also been tied to geopolitical tensions and power struggles between countries. For example, the U.S. has banned its own companies from buying chips from China and has put restrictions on other companies selling to China if U.S. technology is involved in the manufacturing process. This is part of a broader effort to limit China's access to high-end chips. While this move has been controversial, it is seen by many as a necessary step to ensure that the U.S. remains competitive in this critical industry. But the U.S. has been grappling with a significant challenge when it comes to competing with Asian nations in the field of chip manufacturing. This discrepancy is largely due to differences in labor costs, which are significantly lower in many Asian countries than they are in the U.S. Moreover, in China, there is a strong cultural emphasis on national pride and unity, which has enabled the government to mobilize its workforce in support of the country's economic and technological goals. This stands in stark contrast to the more rights-based and individualistic approach of many liberal democracies, which can make it more challenging to compete in certain industries. In response to the trade restrictions being imposed by the U.S., China has been investing heavily in new chip manufacturing initiatives as it seeks to become more technologically self-sufficient. While this is a long-term goal, it is clear that China sees chips as a critical resource that it cannot afford to be without. As we enter a new decade, The US has been carefully watching China's rise with unease, as it has seen China make friends and invest in nations all over the world. While the US has played a role in China's economic growth by importing goods, there is a growing sense of unease as China's power and influence continue to expand. Some political realists argue that having one superpower in the world is a good thing, as it helps keep everyone in line. This is known as unipolarity, and the US has been the sole superpower for decades. However, with China becoming more formidable, the world may soon enter into a state of bipolarity. This could have serious consequences, potentially leading to war and even nuclear war. Why are we talking about this? Because China's growth is tied to its need for chips, which are essential for powering the country's economy. If China becomes the world's superpower, it could use this power to police the world and pursue its own economic interests, much like the US has done for decades. This is a nightmare scenario for politicians in Washington, regardless of their political affiliation. We must have thought that Russia is the biggest threat when it comes to US dominance in the global arena. But it's not. It's China. While the US has been engaged in a conflict with Russia over Ukraine, this is seen as a temporary issue that will eventually sort itself out. China, on the other hand, is a long-term concern that will only grow as the country continues to expand its power and influence. Despite the risks involved, the US has a vested interest in maintaining its dominance in the world, which is why it has invested billions of dollars into the arms industry and continues to engage in conflicts around the globe. However, as China's power grows, it remains to be seen whether the US will be able to maintain its position as the world's sole superpower. For now, China is enemy number one, and its growth and ascent to power will continue to be a major concern for the US and the rest of the world. The US knows that it may soon have to face off against China in a bipolar reality, and that it will need the most advanced chips for everything from general infrastructure to highly sophisticated military applications, such as modern aircraft and intelligence tools. But the need for advanced chips isn't limited to weaponry alone. Everything from high-end communication systems to surveillance drones and augmented reality glasses require these advanced chips to function properly. Even 3D printing is expected to play a major role in the creation of new weapons in the future, with military pundits suggesting that 3D printing will soon be a critical capability in upcoming wars. Both China and the US are vying for a monopoly on the chip market, knowing that whoever rules the industry will ultimately hold the balance of power. If China were to pull ahead, the US would be forced to attack its chip industry and go up against any nation that is helping China. Proxy wars would become commonplace, and the battle over resources could turn Asia and Africa into battlegrounds. At this point, we're only at the beginning of what could be a technological Cold War. The first sparks of a new arms race are already beginning to fly as the two superpowers compete for dominance in the chip industry. If you like our story, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Until our next story.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories.